Hello and welcome to the Grove Church Podcast. I'm Charlie Lofton, the lead pastor there, and we are so glad that you're joining us. Whether you are a member and you're just catching up on a sermon that you missed, or you're someone who's brand new, we are really glad that you are joining us. And if you are new in some way, and I know that a lot of people will do that, will listen to sermons first before they visit, I want you to know that we would love to meet you at any point. You can join us live in our services on Sunday, 9 and 10:30, or our streaming service at 10:30. Either way, we would love to be able to get to know you. And regardless of why you are here listening to this sermon today, thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, good morning. Hey, if you are new here, I am Charlie, the lead pastor here. I'm really glad you are worshiping with us today. And as Mark mentioned, we are in the middle of a series in 1 John. If you've been here for some of it, a few weeks ago, I mentioned we were talking about this theological issue that John brings up, where we try to wrestle, and Christians have been wrestling with this for a while, of like, if God gives me life and gives me Jesus and eternal life, if it's completely free, then it doesn't matter what I do. But it seems like the Bible is full of a lot of commandments and a lot of things that says, like, if you don't do this, you're in trouble. And how we reconcile these two different ideas is one of the most significant theological issues that I think that we can wrestle with, because you find people all the time, if you spend too much time over here, then you can all of a sudden think it doesn't matter what I do, and then their life falls apart. But people who live over here feeling like they have this overwhelming sense of obligation, I have to be good enough, I have to earn God's love, it becomes stressful and exhausting and impossible, and people get discouraged and just kind of walk away from the faith. So how do I put together these two different ideas? God loves me unconditionally, and God has commanded me to live a certain way. How do we put those two things together, I think, is one of the most significant things that we wrestle with, that I think that can be a determiner of our long-term spiritual health. And so I bring this up because John already brought it up once, and I think he's bringing it up again today. And so as I was getting ready for today, I was thinking about different ways in the past that I've heard people try to resolve it. And the first one I can think of is my fourth grade friend, Randy. If you've been around a few years, you may have heard me talk about Randy one time. He lived across the street from our elementary school, and his dad was the pastor at this church that was right there. And of course, it's an old school kind of deal. So the church was here and their house was right next to it. I had a sleepover there one night. And he said, well, let's just sneak over to the church. I'm like, okay. And so we're sitting in there, and he said a curse word, which is, I couldn't believe it, that a guy would say that, much less in a church. I'm like, bro, you just can't. He's like, bro, you don't understand. I figured it all out. You can do whatever you want during the day. And at the end, you say, God, forgive me. And then, boom, it's clear, and you can do it. And then you wake up the next day, you get to do it all over again. Like, man, I don't know. Like, I'm not an expert in theology, Randy, but I'm not sure that's exactly it. But I mean, he had a way it was working out. In our church, it was a little different. I would have never gotten the impression that God was up there cleaning slates, that it felt like there was a lot of pressure to behave a certain way, and that God was going to be greatly displeased with you if you did not follow certain rules. And there were certain rules that meant more than others, and we just talked about those all the time. And one of them was around sex. And so there would be a time every year in our youth group where the youth pastor would have one Sunday, or I think it was on Wednesday, more likely, where we would talk about sex and dating. And it was a tradition every year for someone, usually me, because I was the ringleader of problems, would ask him this question. Well, how far is too far to go physically in a dating relationship? We know we're not supposed to have sex, but how far is too far? It's a classic youth group question. And you may be sitting there thinking, that is a really good question to ask. Because that's important. Like, we're asking about boundaries. No. Do not attribute to me any good motives at all. My motive in asking was because it was the highlight of the year to watch the youth pastor squirm as he's describing the various body parts that you can and cannot touch in a way that felt appropriate for our church at the time. And so it was just funny to watch him sweat. And we had no interest in his answer. We could not have cared less about his particular answer. But the reality of it is, even if there had been sincere motives there, it's not a great question. It's not a great question. Because basically what you're asking is, what is the most I can do and still get away with it? What can I do? Like how far too wrong can I get and God not be mad at me? How far is too far? Because I want to know what this line is. I want to live right here. A better question is, what is appropriate? What does an appropriate physical relationship look like? What is the best way for me in a dating relationship to honor the person that I'm dating? Same sorts of ideas, but coming from a different place, not of a heart of what can I get away with, but what is best, what is ideal. And from the time, again, that I was very young till now, I just find myself just kind of wrestling with how can I be at peace with the relationship that I have with God and also live the life that he's called me to? How can I embrace the freedom that comes from God giving me Jesus for free and live out the obligation that he has called me to? So again, John has already brought this up once, and I believe he's bringing it up here again, but in a very different way, because what they're wrestling with is different. So John has already kind of been involved with this group. And then as we talked about this a couple of weeks ago, that there's this kind of first century heresy referred to as the Gnostics that were coming around and kind of giving them different ideas about what the Christian life should look like. And the two big things were they didn't really believe in faith and putting your trust in Jesus the way that we did. They believed that salvation came from a moment of kind of secret enlightenment. And you had this special secret moment with God where you just kind of got revealed secret truths, and that is how you found God. And they also were very anti anything that was physical body. Anything that was physical. The God that created the physical universe is not the real God, according to them. Jesus could not have become a man because if Jesus is worthy of anything, he would not have put on physical flesh. He would have pretended so that he could help point us towards this enlightenment, but he would have never been a person. And I think we're going to see over this passage more implications of that and why John is coming in, trying to address kind of what the connection is. I'm living here in this life. I've got this physical life right here in this world, and I have a connection with this God who is here. Why and in what way does my life here matter to this relationship? And again, I think it's a very significant question we ask. I'm here, God's there. Does God look at me and my situation? Does it matter to him? And should it matter to me the way that I live my life here? 1 John chapter 2, starting verse 28. And now, dear children, continue in him, so that when he appears, we may be confident and unashamed before him at his coming. If you know that he is righteous, you know that everyone who does what is right has been born of him. So you can tell he's already introducing the idea here. I hope you can see that. Think about it. He's coming, and when he appears, you want to be someone who is confident, unashamed. I mean, you can imagine Jesus comes, and everybody who follows him, hey, come over here, right? And then I want to be one who's like, yeah, man, Jesus, man, remember we're bros. And like, man, I think I'm in, but I'm gonna kind of put my shirt over here. I'm like, it would just be awkward. I think I'll get in, but I don't necessarily want to make eye contact with him because he's going to ask some questions I don't want to answer. Like, you don't want that. You want to be able, when you see Jesus for the first time, head held high. And he says, and you know who Jesus is. He's righteous. And if you want to be one of his, you want to do what is right. And honestly, that makes perfect sense. Jesus is a good dude. You're on Jesus' team. You should live a life like him. And he's going to go into a little bit more depth here about what he means by that, starting in verse 1 of chapter 3. See what great love the Father has lavished on us, that we should be called children of God, and that is what we are. The reason the world does not know us is that it did not know him. Dear friends, now we are children of God, and what we will be has not yet been made known. But we know that when Christ appears, we shall be like him, for we shall see him as he is. All who have this hope in him purify themselves just as he is pure. Everyone who sins breaks the law. In fact, sin is lawlessness. But you know that he appeared so that he might take away our sins, and in him is no sin. No one who lives in him keeps on sinning. No one who continues to sin has either seen him or known him. Now he comes to some pretty bold conclusions there at the end. It's like, man, if anybody is sinning, continuing to sin, you aren't on his team. Which right now, if you think about it, maybe it's a little knot in my stomach because I know who I am and I know what I've done. But I think we're going to see, let's just back it all the way up to kind of where he started here and find his kind of progression, his logical and theological progression that he gets here, and see exactly then what he means by this conclusion at the end. But he starts in verse 1 and 2 very clearly. Guess what? Let's celebrate. Because see, the Father has just lavished us with this incredible love to the point to where we can be called children of God. Now, I want you to think about that for a second. This simple idea, we are children of God. Now, you may have heard song. There's been a song that was based on that verse. Maybe you've heard lots of songs that talk about this. Being a child of God. It may be a phrase that is so common to you that it's like, bro, that is not significant enough to be one of the things with the words on the screen. Bro, we've got that. And honestly, I don't think we do. I think you understand that God is a creator. You understand that that you are a part of God's creation. You understand that as such, as part of his creation, I'm kind of subject to him. I understand God is a king and I'm in his kingdom. But there is a difference. There is a huge difference between being created by God and being a child of God. There are lots of things that God created that are not his children. Rocks and trees and fish. They matter to him. He created them. He rules over them. But just because he created something doesn't make it his child. This is something very different. And I think when he says this to them and says, think about this, how much God loves us. He decided to make you his son, his daughter. I think it was overwhelming to them. Lord, King, ruler, sure, Father. Father in that sort of way would have been significant. 2,000 years worth of reflection, and it may seem very common to us, but think about it. The creator God of the universe wants to have a father-to-child relationship with you and has granted you that status. In John 3:16, same author talking about Jesus, right, says it, refers to Jesus as the only begotten Son, that Jesus has this unique relationship with the Father. But a couple of chapters earlier in John 1, he said, to those of us who believe, to receive Jesus, believe in his name, he gives us the same right to become children of God. And Paul refers to this as we who are in Christ have been adopted in as children of God. And there was a time in my life when that was just a very abstract theological concept. That's interesting. It's like, and there's a whole section of theology books on what the ministry of adoption looks like for Jesus and what does it mean to be adopted. And I would read and I would study it and I was like, it's all very interesting. But it moved from interesting to very, very personal for me about 11 years ago. And for some of you who have been around a long time, you will recognize this little girl. And that is Layla Lofton. That is our youngest daughter, who is now 12. And we were her foster parents from the time that she was 3 or 4 days old, and brought her into our home. And we lavished her with love and made her a part of our family. And we just love being with her and loving her and helping raising her. And on October the 10th, 2012, we had the privilege of standing before a judge and many of you and a lot of our extended family and declare to the world that we want her to have our name. And she is forever going to be ours. And I want her to be mine, and I need the world to know it. And you can keep looking at that picture, but if I look at it again, I'm going to lose it, and then we're not going to have a conversation anymore. She just means that much to me. And I love her so much, she's mine. And I ask you this question: do you think God thinks differently than that about you? Man, I remember him, I remember her. She was really going through it. And then she put her faith in my son, Jesus. And now she's my daughter. I remember that day. I remember when he decided he wanted to be mine, and I got to make him my child. I got to adopt him as my son. And you think he thinks about that day and he gets a little teary-eyed because of how much he loves you and wanted to give this to you. I think this phrase has so much more power behind it than I think that we realize. Behold, how much love the Father has shown to us, that we could be named as his children. Now let's go back to the passage here, verse 2. Verse 2, dear friends, now we are children of God, and what we will be has not yet been made known. But we know what when Christ appears, we shall be like him, for we shall see him as he is. Now, this is a very interesting thing for him to bring up. Like, you've become children of God, and here's the thing that you need to understand. And now all of a sudden we're talking about the resurrection. And now all of a sudden we're talking about the resurrection. Now listen, there's going to come a time when you're going to not just kind of abstractly follow God and abstractly follow Jesus, but you're going to be with him face to face. And honestly, and this is a pretty common question. You're like, man, what's that going to be like? Right? And you're like, no, it's not weird. I know what it is. It's like harps on a cloud, right? Harps on a cloud, right? Some people, yeah, that's harps on a cloud. And no. Some people are like, we're going to be like little balls of light, right? Or like, you think, I hear it's like you're just in church all the time, worship service all the time. And so that makes some people being like, I don't know if I'm looking forward to it. Like, you can't offend me by saying, I understand if it's like nonstop church service. And what are we going to be like? Are we going to be angels? And he's saying, you don't really know. But here's what we do know. That when you see him, he is going to make you like him. So we are children of God, and one day we will be like Jesus. Now, this is a really interesting thing to come up here, to kind of the nature of the resurrection. Because this actually, if you've been around here the last few months, it's actually come up a couple of different times. In John 14, we were talking about big questions, and one of them is Jesus the only way to find God? That was the whole question. Was Jesus was like, hey, I'm leaving you, but no big deal. I'm going to prepare a place for you. And you're like, where? It's like, you know where. It's like, we don't know where. Show us the way. And he's like, I'm the way. And he's like, we don't understand what you're talking about. There's a lot of anxiety that they were feeling about, I know what it's like to follow Jesus here. If you leave, we don't know anything about that. He says, trust in me. And in 1 Corinthians 15 on Easter Sunday, we talked about the anxiety the Corinthians were feeling, that somehow that maybe the resurrection had happened and they missed it. And they were nervous about it. And Paul was completely and totally reassuring them about the power of the resurrection of Jesus Christ and how we can put our confidence in that And we can know that he has us, and we don't have to have these sorts of anxieties. Now, they're having a different issue here. Because again, like I talked about a little bit, this group called the Gnostics that are coming around and telling them all these things. One of them is that the physical body is bad. So Jesus didn't have a physical body. And they're like, then what? Then again, is it, I guess it's kind of the balls of light then, right? Like we're going to be able to shed this and then be who we really are, which isn't this. And John, having been there and having seen Jesus, when he resurrected, did not become a ball of light. He became something. And you can just tell, John, who was there and saw it, is still confused. Because he was perfect and kind of glowy and kind of like, ooh, but he still had the holes in his hands, and that was weird. We could touch him, but he walked through walls. And I don't, he's like, bro, I don't know. I don't know. But here's what I do know. We can trust him. We can trust him. This is not in our ability to kind of put things together and make things make sense, and that somehow I can know everything. It's not clear exactly what it's going to look like, but you know what is clear? Jesus. And he loves you. And when you get to see him face to face, you don't have to be ashamed. You don't have to be nervous. He's going to make you like him. And we're going to have life with him forever. Trust in that. So we're taking this really interesting path here. He's really just trying to help them be at peace, to kind of put aside some of these false things that the Gnostics have been saying. See, listen, the God that they're rejecting, he actually completely is totally into you. He's not evil. He's not dumb. He's the creator, but he's also your father and wants to have this sort of relationship with you. And we may be uncertain about what the resurrection is going to look like, but we're not uncertain about Jesus. And we are living lives like we get to respond to this incredible love that God has. And we get to respond to this idea that we know that we're going to be able to be with Jesus and connect with him and be like him. And then he continues on, verse 3 of chapter 3. All who have this hope in him purify themselves, just as he is pure. Everyone who sins breaks the law. In fact, sin is lawlessness. But you know that he appeared so that he might take away our sins, and in him is no sin. No one who lives in him keeps on sinning. No one who continues to sin has either seen him or known him. So we'll start with the simplest, easiest thing that John says here, and then kind of work our way down from there. He's like, listen, you're going to be like Jesus someday. And if you have this hope in him, you should purify yourself the way that he's pure. If he's going to make you like him someday, one day you'll be like Jesus, you should go ahead and start acting like him now. It's actually a very simple, logical step, I would say. You follow Jesus. Jesus is going to make you like him. As such, you should start acting like him now. Because God has loved you overwhelmingly. He has made you his very own son or daughter. He loves you, and you want to respond to that. And this Jesus who sacrificed himself for you is going to turn you into something greater than what you are right now. And you're going to be like him. And people who, if that's you and that's your hope, and you know that Jesus is this pure, awesome Son of God, and you want to be in him, with him, you should act like him. But then he says something here in these last couple of verses that are the kinds of things that you'll see every now and again in the Bible, where it simply says something it seems like what he's saying here, but if you are someone who continues to sin, you are no longer with God. Or if you continue to sin, you're just not on his team. No one who continues to sin has either seen him or known him. Now, I'm not going to take a poll. We don't have to take a poll. I'm not asking anybody to raise their hand. But if I were to take a poll and say, hey, how many of you, after having known who Jesus is, have continued to sin? 3 really bold people would raise their hand, then a few kind of like this, and then eventually once critical mass, everybody would finally get their hands up. And so a verse that says this is very overwhelming. And verses like this are very often used in this discussion about whether or not freedom in Christ is real freedom, or am I obligated to live a certain way, or I'm going to lose something with God. And so people will use these verses and they'll use them in such a way that really just kind of feels like my relationship with God is uncertain. And if I'm not perfect, if I don't follow all of these rules, and then the person who's showing you this verse is telling you, here are the rules that matter the most. So I give you the rules. You got to follow these rules. If you don't follow these rules, then you better watch out here. And it's a way of kind of keeping each other under control. And then we feel discouraged. And then we live lives very often just kind of feeling kind of paralyzed. I'll never live up to that. I'll never live up to this. And so I just get discouraged and fade away. But then every now and then you'll get a very different pastor, maybe someone like me, and he'll say something really theologically astute like this. That verse right there that says that doesn't really mean what it says. Now let's go on to verse 7. And then we just kind of keep scrolling. It means something different. Let's at least try to do a little bit better than that. What is John referring to here? Again, we need to think, what specific thing is he addressing? Well, see, he's addressing what these Gnostics are saying. These people that are coming in and saying, this physical world does not matter. All that matters is the spiritual and your spiritual connection with God. And what your body is gross and pointless. And really life is about breaking free from that. And who I am, this doesn't matter. And if this doesn't matter, I mean, just think about it, right? If I told you what happens to your body is irrelevant, it just doesn't matter. All that matters is the spiritual. Some of you would be like, okay, that's weird. And some of you would be like, hold up now. Free for all. I can do whatever I want. And there was at least some of that kind of getting out there into these people that John is talking to. And listen, guys, it's not like that. Whatever that is, this idea that you can connect with God, you can be a child of God, that you can be someone who is drawn to Jesus and live a life that thinks that who I am right now just doesn't matter, that's something. That's something, but that's not a relationship with Jesus. And so this is not about someone who follows Jesus and on occasion sins, or even sins, kind of have a repeating cycle of sin from time to time. It's talking about the people who think what I do in this life, what I do with my body, it just doesn't matter. I can just do whatever I want. Like that's something that's not Jesus. But you'll notice the way that he expresses this. Hey, what you do, actually, it does matter. It doesn't come from a place where God's going to get you. God's going to kick you out. And sometimes we act like this is a really complex theological concept to understand. But where did he start? You are God's children, and he has lavished you with love. So be like him. And we brought a precious baby girl into our home. And we have lavished her with love. And you know what? She's just like us. Some people say she's more like you than any of you are. She is more like her quirky sense of humor, the way that the confidence with which she carries herself. I mean, she's incredible. And she is one of us. 100%. And is there going to be, but what if one day, what if she didn't? What if she didn't want to be like you? What if she started acting a certain way? Like, I gave her my name. She's mine forever. I'm not going to kick her out of my house. She's mine. And with that level of confidence, that level of freedom, she is growing in her confidence and in her beauty inside and out each and every day. Behold what manner of love the Father has given to you, that you could become his children, and Jesus is going to make you like him, and now you get to be like him. But what if I don't? What does that even mean? What if you don't? No, what if you don't? This is what you now get to do. And when we really understand the lavishness of God's love and the privilege that it is to be made like Jesus, the natural response is to respond to become more like him. There's plenty of opportunity in the rest of this book where John is going to talk about how do we make things right when we do have these sins. What does all of this mean? But right now, let's clear this idea out there that it doesn't matter the way that we live. It does matter. And why does it matter? Because we live lives of privilege because of the overwhelming love that God has shown us and the privilege that we have to be like Jesus. So let's live like him. Let me pray. God, I thank you so much. I thank you that we can become your sons and daughters. And God, if there are any of us here that are really here because we're just trying to figure out the religion, we're trying to just learn some things, trying to earn points, God, I pray we would no longer settle for that. But we would want life with you as a son or daughter through your son, Jesus Christ. And that we could experience that love. And that, God, that we can have the confidence that one day we will get to be like your son. And that, God, that we would live lives that honor that love, honor that privilege, and live like you now. Through the power of your Holy Spirit and as a response to your love, God, I pray that we would live lives differently and that we would grow past anything that says that what we do doesn't matter, how we live doesn't matter, but with full confidence in the love that you've shown us, we would live lives that do matter to you, to one another, God, to ourselves. And as always, we are so thankful for your son who makes all this possible. And it's in his name we pray. Amen.
Thanks again for joining us on our sermon podcast, and you can learn more about us at thegrovechurch.org. And if you go to thegrovechurch.org/connect, there's a form you could fill out. Just let us know that you've been listening. And if you want to dig deeper on some of these topics that we cover in our sermon podcast or just in other issues of dealing with culture or theology, those kinds of things, you can check out our Cultivate podcast, which is on the same feed, however you found this particular podcast. So again, this is Charlie, the lead pastor at The Grove, and thank you so much for joining us.